student environment. I will be serving as your vibrant facilitator today. I am zooming in from Shawnee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Osage lands, known by many as Lexington, Kentucky. As we enter into this space today, it would be great to know who we have in the room. In the chat, please share your name, where you're zooming in from, and what does support in your career look like for you? Again, in the chat, share your name, where you're zooming in from, and what does support in your career look like for you? Austin, Texas, where the weather has finally broken. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Colorado, where the sun is shining. Thanks, Leah. Aaron from Atlanta, Georgia. Stephanie, we have another Atlanta, Georgia, and Nora. We have Canada, Louisville, Kentucky, right down the street from me. California, Michigan, Alabama, Oregon. Awesome. Keep them coming. I want to remind you that the Women's Forest Congress has social media handles. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Connect to our Women's Forest Congress network to share your positive experience in real time as you participate today. You can tag Women's Forest Congress and use the hashtag #WeAreWFC. As we enter into our space today, let's get comfortable. Please stay on mute when you are not speaking. And if you like, you are more than welcome to turn your camera on because we love to see each of your beautiful faces. Today, we are focusing on the Women's Forest Congress Declaration Resolution number 8. Intentionally identify and support more women and those from underrepresented groups to achieve leadership positions. We've got a great agenda for you. You'll hear from new members of the Women's Forest Congress Steering Committee and Advisory Council. Learn more about the importance of Women's Forest Congress leadership for equity and inclusion theme. Be inspired by our guest speaker, Dr. Reagan Flowers from the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. And the fun doesn't stop there. We'll then move into a time of networking and brainstorming ways we can collectively support more women in achieving leadership roles. And before we jump in, I also want to thank the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, also known as SFI, for their sponsorship of today's virtual gathering. The Women's Forest Congress is extremely grateful for their continued support and engagement. Now, I would like to pose 2 questions via the chat, if you feel comfortable sharing your responses. So question number 1, what parts of your identity are not well represented in leadership positions? What parts of your identity are not well represented in leadership positions? Single, no children, female, age under 40, economically disadvantaged background. Young people are not well represented and often told we're too green, quote unquote. Hispanic women, young moms. Introversion. And I think it's important for us to share this because a lot of times we feel like we're in this alone. But as I read in this chat, I know that I'm not alone because I do identify with many of these missing pieces within the organization. Women, moms, intergenerational caregiver, moms, irrelevant of age, not a quote unquote doctor of something. Thank you. And then the second question, where have you been a leader in your life or how have you or your organization supported leadership development in others? Again, where have you been a leader in your life, or how have you or your organization supported leadership development in others? Women with X DEI team in my organization, social and networking professionally as a forester that's not in an environmental activist organization. Advocating for pay equity for my coworkers. Yes, keep them coming. And again, this is a safe space, so I don't want you to feel like what happens here is going to go outside of here. But again, if you feel comfortable, share. I'm putting myself out as a speaker to encourage more women speakers at professional conferences, asking employees what interests them outside of their job description, giving them a chance to fold that in. Absolutely. Keep them coming. I'm going to keep moving forward, but please keep sharing your responses to the question. I want to thank you all for being vulnerable with me for a moment. I hope today, moving forward, we understand the importance of being intentional in identifying and supporting more women and those from underrepresented groups to achieve leadership positions. Oprah stated that helping others reach their full potential is success. As I have excelled in my career, helping others is what has fulfilled me. As women, we must support each other, empower each other, inspire each other, acknowledge each other, and most importantly, show up for each other like we are today. When we pour positivity into each other, you will begin to create a ripple effect of positive change, and promise you it is contagious. Representation matters. I would not be where I am today if my mentor did not take me under his wing to uncover the potential that he saw in me. I'll be honest, if I did not have someone intentionally pushing me daily to step outside of my comfort zone, I would not be where I am today. Over the last 12 years, I have been in 5 different roles at the University of Kentucky. The last 5 years, I have served as an administrator in the college and have had the opportunity to be a voice for the voiceless and show up for those who could not show up for themselves. Being in a leadership role is very rewarding. I challenge each woman in the room today and allies who aspire to be in a leadership role to seek someone in a role you aspire to be in and learn what it takes to get there. No one's journey to leadership is the same, but gaining insight along the way will help you through the process. The last piece of advice I would give is to speak your leadership role into existence by manifesting and working towards that goal. Speaking affirmations daily helped me to build confidence and knowing that I belong in every room. I mean, every room that I have stepped in. It is so important to show up for yourself because as women, it's easy to show up for everyone else and put our needs, quote unquote, on the back burner. So moving forward today, I challenge each of you to intentionally identify and support more women and those from underrepresented groups to achieve leadership positions. I would now like to introduce one of our steering committee members, Daphne Yin, and one of our advisory council members, Cecilia Hernandez, to share the business of the Women's Forest Congress. Daphne is the head of climate and sustainability at Endeavor, North America, and now adds Women Forest Congress Steering Committee to her impressive resume. Cecilia has been in the public horticulture realm for over 12 years, working in botanic gardens and urban park networks as an intern, then gardener, project manager, supervisor, and curator. Cecilia recently decided to take a pause from her career and to be a full-time caretaker for her 14-month-old son, and adds Women Forest Congress Advisory Council member to her busy plate. I would now like to turn it over to Daphne and Cecilia.
Thank you so much, Mia. Really great welcoming remarks. And I'll briefly just share that I'm based in DC. My background is in environmental management, and I currently work for, as Mia mentioned, a small consulting firm called Indu4 North America. We work on conservation, restoration, and also kind of human rights and livelihoods dimensions of the forest sector. And it's such an honor to be here today and to be a new steering committee member. On the side, I also do some work on forest therapy guiding. I'm a certified guide. And I also, especially with this group today, just wanted to share, I also do some advocacy for polycystic ovary syndrome on the side. And yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell. Cecilia, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everybody. I'm Cecilia Hernandez. Like Mia mentioned, I come from the adjacent field of public gardens where there's urban forests and often a lot of street trees. I think public gardens are just the perfect place to get more messaging out about forests and could be invaluable in spreading enthusiasm and calling people to action for the sector. This is my first Women's Forest Congress gathering, so it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. We wanted to give a quick overview of the declaration that the Women's Forest Congress put together. I think there's a next slide. Yes, wonderful. So those of you who already participated in the Women's Forest Congress last year, you're probably very familiar with this. Some of us may be new, and so there was a kind of an extended process using consensus to really develop this declaration that the Women's Forest Congress is convening all of us together to really advance. And it's a long declaration, but there's a part of it that's specific to leadership for equity and inclusion. And so much of what we'll be talking about today is really supported through these elements of the declaration. And I won't read everything here, but I think that, you know, we are really a special group here today. And I see that there are over 50 of us. And although each of us is definitely on our own kind of personal journey, we actually collectively have the ability to really shift where the forest sector is, which is still unbelievably male dominated, and which is also you know, racially also quite homogenous in certain parts of this country, but also in other parts of the world. So I would love for us to just, you know, keep these in the back of your mind and thinking about how we develop a more inclusive space. And that could be in many dimensions, whether it's on race or gender, or even age and the discipline that we bring, the worldviews that we bring. There are a variety of different ways in which we definitely need kind of more diversity in the types of solutions that we would like to see for this sector, and that needs to be reflected also in our representation. And then the last point on here, I think, is worth noting, where we are really excited by having more women in leadership positions. And leadership doesn't have to be C-suite, but it's kind of an easy benchmark to say, at least by 2050, to be able to achieve more than 25% women in C-suite positions. I think that would be a great success. It's definitely not 50%, but 25% is still, you know, quite a bit further than where we are today. Next slide. So this year, you know, we have really been thinking about how we promote the declaration, even through the own governance, through the governance of the Women's Forest Congress. And so I wanted to just highlight the new steering committee members. Aside from myself, there's Yvette Browning, and I do think that she RSVP'd. I don't know if she's here today, but if you are, do you want to say hello? No? And then Megan Musto, she's also another steering committee member. She will be joining us later today. And then on the next slide, we also have our advisory council members. And so you just heard from Cecilia here. We also have Tony, Yana, I also believe is here today. and a variety of other incredible individuals. So we're really trying to, in the spirit of the theme today, bring together some incredible women from very different backgrounds. And I really encourage you all, especially in the breakout rooms, to get to know them. Next slide. And so this is actually a slide that includes all of the different resolutions that the Women's Forest Congress is working toward. As Mia introduced earlier, today we're really focused on this number 8. You'll see it in the top right corner, which is to intentionally identify and support more women and those from underrepresented groups to achieve leadership positions. Certainly everything on this page is interrelated. We can't have women getting into leadership positions without these other things happening, really. So we can definitely, you know, hone in on this point, but also keep in mind these other parts of the, these other resolutions in the back of your mind as enabling conditions for women to really excel in leadership positions. And as we start to get into the act of sharing, I can just briefly share a little bit from my own history where, you know, Mia had this wonderful prompt earlier of how we're showing up and parts of us that are difficult to show up in the workplace. I think in my journey at Indufor, just as an example, I've been here for 7 years and I came in as a consultant and I'm an introvert. I'm not like the loudest person in the room. I also have health conditions. And so I think one of the really big enabling conditions for me to actually get to the position where I am today, leading my own portfolio of work, is that I had an ally in the organization. Indufor has a broader history of being kind of very homogenous and male dominated, but my managing director, he saw my potential, and it wasn't that I was there on day one, but he invested in training. He gave me incentives through bonus structure, competitive pay. When I needed particular kind of advice on how to manage a project or deliver on the technical aspects of what we're doing, which is often very much learned on the job. It's not something that we're just ready for coming out of a grad school program. He was able to walk me through without micromanaging. So I think that's a really key part. And I'm really proud to say that my other female colleagues, they've also been able to build out their own portfolios of work. We are US based, but we've really been intentional about empowering colleagues who are based in Belize, in Brazil, other parts of the world to really take ownership over their own work. Another piece that I think would just be helpful for this group is thinking about flexibility. And so especially during COVID, I think we all learned to redefine what was possible. And so we do have this continued flexibility to work remotely. I have PCOS, and that's often been at the back of my head when I think about how I show up in a workplace. And so to be able to kind of destigmatize that and share it with my colleagues was one of the most powerful things, really. And to actually hear that others in my company are also navigating it or have loved ones who are. HIPAA is real, so there's no need to kind of disclose if you don't want to, but I do think that a key part of promoting women into leadership positions is promoting the whole person and not just expecting that they're delivering on the work itself. One last thing I'll say, which is really critical, is the work that we do can be very challenging, right? The forest sector is not anywhere near to an ideal state. And so I really do also encourage a lot of investment in mental health. I've taken my team for a forest bathing exercise. I actually went into forest bathing because I just found so much of my work to be highly analytical and desk-bound and crisis-oriented. And it's not a sustainable way of running this marathon if we think of the career as a marathon. So yeah, those are just a few details from my personal professional life, and I wanted to turn it over to Cecilia to share her experience as well.
Thank you, Daphne. I have been a laborer for most of my career, so kind of the opposite, and working in public gardens and parks. And it feels like in a lot of the organizations where I've worked, which have been nonprofits, or government, city government, this ability to move up or try to get even a pay increase is really limited due to budgets and also just the way the structure works, that the triangle is so steep that everyone is competing for that one spot. So you just, as an intern, I moved around a lot, would just find a new opportunity to build my experience and see what else I could apply to another job. And then once I was kind of in a steady track as a gardener for a while, the only way I was able to move up to be a manager was that the city offered a development program, like a year-long, once a week, paid during work time, that people could come out of it with 2 years of supervisory experience, because the next role up, you had to have supervisory experience, but if you stayed in your labor role, you would never get it because the person above you was getting that experience. So it was kind of a stuck thing. Fortunately, I got to do in that program, and then I was able to be a manager for a short while. So I've been in the world of horticulture. So actually there's a lot of women in that world. And there's still, though, that unfortunate bias about them being better at the floral design and the shopping, and the men are the ones who do the irrigation work. Oh, it's so frustrating. I want to get on that heavy equipment too, but the chance to get trained on it was just fleeting. I wanted to make some comments about being Hispanic. I'm Latina. I was born in Puerto Rico, and of course the Caribbean islands have a really rich blend of races. So that in itself is kind of a hazy thing, but I look white, though not compared to some of my relatives, and that has definitely given me an advantage in my career, I can say, especially also with combination of my not existent accent, even though I am fluent in Spanish. However, my name Hernandez is a very blatant thing. I can't escape it when I send an email or submit a resume or someone sees my bio. So it's kind of doing the job hunt. When I first came out of landscape architecture school deep in the recession, it became more about just being competitive. I was in architecture, so there's so much competition where I was in New York City. And it was more about that than I think my race or my ethnicity. So yeah, and the fact that I studied in Miami, Florida, where everyone is Hispanic, it's been this interesting shift when I moved to the Northeast to actually start my career and didn't really know where I was going. I studied architecture, but then fell into horticulture and haven't looked back. You never know what's going to happen. You have to keep looking in different pockets that might not be your exact intention, or because everyone's interests are so varied, and we have so many abilities as women who like to do so many things and try different things, and even as introverts, myself one as well. So I just want to say one last thing that I recently saw in a job post, that the post actually said, "You women and minorities often think you have to be qualified for everything on this list. Please still apply." And I was like, are they talking to me? Like, how did they? So I'm glad it's becoming more of a trend and the norm for company culture to encourage that, but it should definitely be coming directly from our managers as well, so we don't have to leave the job. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much, Daphne and Cecilia. You all truly did drop some gems. I hope you ladies are taking notes, because I have been over here taking notes myself. So thank you all so much for sharing the business of the Women's Forest Congress and your experience intentionally identifying and supporting more women, but most importantly, yourself. I would like to say congratulations and welcome to the new steering committee and advisory council members. Special thanks to our recent sponsors, SFI, Rainier, American Forest and Paper Association, as well as longtime and returning sponsors, Weyerhaeuser, American Forest, U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, Society of American Foresters, and American Forest Foundation.